I tend to hire people who are not like me at all. I really like diverse perspectives and just personality, background. Emotional intelligence is huge. The problem really isn't the problem. There's always something else behind it, but you have to be patient enough to get there.
Hi, my name is Rohit Bassi, and welcome to the People Quotient podcast, where we focus on the most important asset in your organization, your people. In this podcast, I'll be speaking with CEOs, investors, and executives from around the world to learn how they build high-performing teams. Without further ado, let's listen in.
Hey Tash, how are you? It's so good to see you. It's been a while.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
I can't wait to have this conversation with you because I think knowing a bit about your background and seeing you progress over the last many years, you've got a very diverse, really interesting background. But quite frankly, I will do it completely injustice. In fact, I'll get it wrong if I try to explain what is it that you do and what have you done. So maybe you should do that since you're here and tell our audience your personal background, where you grew up and where you come from. Obviously live in LA now, but also professionally, things that you've accomplished and done over the last, call it a decade. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. My story is not the norm, especially for the entertainment world that I'm in. Well, was in and still kind of like a dotted line to. But yeah, background, went to school for television production, but then landed in healthcare in Florida, where I was living in Miami at the time, and worked there and was building a career, doing really well, because that's just the nature of who I am as an individual. So I'm not going to do anything and not do it well. But then, you wake up one day and then I literally was just like, this can't be the rest of my life. I don't want to work on prescriptions and talk about, orders. It's just not my passion. It's not what I want to do. And then I remember I looked at the calendar. I put my finger on a date and I was like, this is the last day I'm working here. And then a month from this date, I'm moving to LA. And that's kind of like how the journey started.
Wow.
Yeah. And got rid of things, shipped things, packed up things, knew no one. I just had two relatives here. And I was just like, all right. And drove across country, landed in LA. And the goal was to work in television and film. That's really what I wanted to do, not really having any experience. So, I had a building career, came here, started from zero, became a production assistant, which anybody who's in entertainment knows that is, you're hungry. Put it to you that way. You're starving, you're hungry,
Literally and otherwise.
Exactly. You look forward to craft service when you're working because there's food on sets and in the office all the time. That's how I got fed for weeks on end because I was just broke. I remember burning through all my savings. But in that though, it was I was having a great time. I'm on a set. I'm on a movie set, and working with actors and just watching magic happen. And from there, the journey kind of just my first big gig working for Warner Brothers Studios in production. And that was a big deal. Because to get a job on a lot as someone who was just a new person, again, it was like landing on the mothership, literally, what, and yeah, then lucked out, and then I got laid off after 4 years, and that was the first time I ever gotten laid off of anything, and that was an experience. And I remember the head of the department, who was, never forget her, Judy Zaylor. She said to me, "This is a good thing that's happening to you. Trust me. This is great." And I was like, I don't have a job. This is great, but okay, thank you. But it actually turned out to be a really great thing because then I ended up landing another gig working in creative where I worked with an executive producer. So I got to see how a show is actually made from a writer's perspective, what the anatomy of writing a show. And then the writer's strike happened. So it's awesome, So we're just hitting them out the park. And then left that and I went into visual effects and animation. And I was like, this is cool. And then realized, we had make an announcement because I started working in marketing. But what we're announcing isn't launching for 2.5 years because it takes 6 months to produce hair in, so that was kind of like the starting journey. And I remember one day there's this thing called the UTA job list. And this was literally like how any jobs that would get posted in the business back, like everything got submitted on this like document. And then your goal and mission in life was to get on this email list.
Yeah.
So, and you would just scout, and it went from executives down to page. Like you literally are somebody that just drops mail off. Like it's all these jobs that were in the industry got posted on this huge document. But I remember looking, and there was this one job that kept popping up, but I had no interest in it because it was working directly with talent. And I was like, I don't want to talk to people like that. I don't really want to engage with actors. Like I'm all about being behind the scenes of production, and I want to be like in the grit things. But I was so unhappy where I was at. So I just went ahead, and I remember applying for this role to be an executive assistant in the talent department at Nickelodeon. And that was the other thing. I was like, kids network, I'm so aged out. Like, I don't even understand. Yeah, it was just one of those things. And I didn't hear anything. And I remember I was going home for the holidays. I couldn't wait to leave. And my flight was like in the evening. And then the day I was leaving, I get a call. Hey, can you come in today for an interview? And I remember being on the phone. Well, I have a flight to catch. So the only way I can make it is I have to be early because I'm leaving for the week. And they were like, no problem. And I get there, they're running behind. I'm sitting and I'm just like on edge because I was like, I got to go. And at this point, I was like, I don't really care about the job. I got to go. But I remember having the interview and I was so just not really focused on like the questions that they were answering. I was just trying to get things out so that I could just get out the door and run home and pack my bags. And then I can like, peace out. Well, I did it. I didn't think I got it. And then I come back from the holidays and they're just like, yeah, we want you to do a second interview and meet the executive. And I was like, oh, fine. Meet the executive. I remember I met her. It was like 7 p.m. at night on a Tuesday, going in her office, sitting there. I'm also like, I'm tired. I've been working all day, but we were having a conversation. And then next thing I know, 2 days later, I got an offer. So I got out of my situation and I got here thinking, this is just to get me out of this thing that I'm not happy in. And I'm doing this to figure out where really is the next place. And so I'm in this department called talent. I have no idea what that means. I just knew that I work for this woman and they deal with actors. And it was right around, like we were 3 weeks away from Kids' Choice Awards. And I didn't even know like how bananas that was. I didn't understand because again, I have aged out. I'm not paying attention to the kids market. And I remember my first, besides being her assistant, she's like, okay, you're going to cover The Rock. And I was like, great. What does that mean? And she's just like, just make sure he's good when we're at rehearsals, when we have this and that, da, da, da. So we get to like award show and I'm assigned Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Yep. And it's like, okay. And so I'm his person. So I'm making sure he has his call sheets and he's good in the schedule and working with his team. And they're just like, he needs this in his room. And so I'm just kind of like this like point person and I'm navigating it. And after 3 days of doing that, I remember going home going, this is so cool. I can't believe this is what this job is. I had no idea. I think I might like it here. That is what started a journey for me, like in the talent space. I ended up staying at Nickelodeon for almost like 7 years. I managed talent on a bunch of different shows. I had some big shows that kids that I worked with and worked up till I became a manager. So from an assistant, and then I left, I was there as a manager and was traveling all over the place and doing all sorts of activations. It was a one time where I realized like both of my strengths were able to be used, which is like the analytical side, the strategic side, as well as the creative side. And because we were talent, we literally had touch points on everything within the company because everybody wanted to work with talent. So I always knew what was going on across the board. Whereas like some departments, you only know what your team's doing. You don't. So if you're in sales, you don't necessarily know what the promo team is doing because you guys don't really communicate with each other. And promo doesn't know what our social justice team is doing because but we communicated with everybody. So I had ears to all the things. My day to day was never the same. I finally found a job where I didn't have to be in the office all the time. I would do 2-3 days in the office and 2 days on set. Those weeks that I had to jump on flights, I'd be gone for 4 or 5 days somewhere else in the country or out of the country. So it was a way for me to like experience creativity with the business side that I also liked. And that's just what catapulted me in this world. And then, social media was this thing that was bubbling up and wasn't going away. And I think everybody thought it was going to go away. And they were like, there's no way kids are going to like only want to watch on like these devices. They want television, but it wasn't going away. So after, like 7 years, I like took a leap and started working for a startup, and they only produce short form content on digital platforms. And this was a way for me to understand that side of the business because I recognized this is kind of the future. This is it. And that was a whole new journey. I had to like everything that I had learned in TV, some of that stuff applied, but like the way everything was executed and whole other set. So I had to learn how to become scrappy because I was so used to the big machine, right? Like like it runs this massive machine and then boom, here goes startup, and it's scrappy and it's all hands on deck and everything moves at lightning speed because we just got to get things going and throw everything to the wall. We'll see what sticks. So like I had to reprogram myself in the way that I work to navigate that. And then I did that and that was fine. And then I got laid off. And then I was like, okay, cool. But this time it was actually like I embraced it. And I literally was just like, I've been working for years and years and I've never had an adult summer vacation. So I used that time to just be while I really thought about what does the next thing really look like for me. And I remember I didn't look at my resume. I didn't take any meetings. I didn't talk about work for the first 30 days of me being laid off. I literally just took a month to just go to museums, sleep at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, whatever.
Nice.
And then cut to, I get hired at, random again. Someone introduces me to someone, you should meet this person, blah, blah, blah. And then I landed a VP of talent at a network. And that and shifted my whole like other trajectory in a different way where I think even for you, this is where it came into building teams and building a structure because I had to build this department from the ground up.
Yeah.
And, working with folks that were reporting to me, like I inherited some people, I brought in some people, and then how do we work this together? I like to say that first year and a half felt like I was going uphill on a mountain in molasses while people throwing bricks at me.
Wow.
And so it was a journey and it really built a lot of character and strength, needless to say. But yeah. And then I ended up, like creating a really team. And then we ended up doing some awesome things for, the time that I was there. And to say that it's great because some of those people that worked under me are now like at different places and I've gotten to see the evolution of their growth and also even just the team. But in that journey, we had COVID and all that stuff happened. And then like maybe a year ago, a major tech company reached out, was like, would you be interested? And at first I was like, this doesn't I don't think so. It doesn't really fit. I'm not really sure. And, and took a meeting, had a conversation. One conversation led to two conversations led to 3. Then I was like, fine, I'll go through the process, went through the interview process. And I remember at the end of the interview process, I was like, I actually want this. Like I could do this. And then I got the job. And so now this is where I'm at. I'm in big tech now, which has been a whole other journey because, it's learning new language. It's learning also another style of working philosophy. feedback is really important. So I come from, teams. You did well because your show did well, ratings were well. You still have a job, like you're good. If no one's screaming at you, and then here it's very different. But yeah, so that's my whole journey. That's my whole
That's
story.
amazing. It's what a journey. What a journey. I mean, I think we could talk about every single one of those for a separate segment, and maybe seems like what's interesting is that listening to you, it's reflecting on your journey. It seems like two things have happened. One is a proactive approach to building your career. And then the other one is a reactive approach to building your career. And in that reactive piece, it sounds like you've learned quite a bit, because the first time you were, asked to move on was a bit of a shock. And obviously, early a time in your life, and you're trying to figure out exactly how that will translate into anything, because you don't know where you're headed. But then as we all mature, you deal with things differently, because now you know how to maximize what has just happened. But what's also interesting is that, you've gone through 3 different industries, in obviously varying scales, from, startup to big media and entertainment conglomerates to now big tech. And I think the last point that you made, which is along that journey, you had to build teams to achieve whatever you need to achieve. So talk to me. And when you say talent, just for those who are not from media and entertainment, when you talk about talent, and, when I talk about talent, well, where talent to me is everything, anything. Talent doesn't have a shape, form, but technically, when you talk about talent, you were talking about artists, correct?
Yes.
In your
what we would
previous
call
role.
what we'd call celebrities,
Celebrities,
like
right.
on camera talent, if they were on the network right now in tech. So it's like top creators, those
Okay.
probably, that you follow on, that have like large followings and stuff.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And when I talk about talent, everyone else as well. So because you need talent to serve talent. So you need talented people around you and teams around you to be able to then actually serve the talent celebrity that you're describing, to manage that and to make sure that segment, whatever it is that you have to do, is then served well. So you're effectively would you say that you're in a B2B service business, or is it B2C? Like, how do you think about what is it, a service business? Is it a product business? Don't really know business.
Sometimes it's all the above. It depends. And this is like the interesting part of it. Sometimes it is service. Sometimes it is product. Sometimes it's, therapy. Sometimes, it really depends. Sometimes we are providing opportunity. It's like we become the almost like ambassadors, or, internal representation for for a group of people that we're working with, to help them get to that next thing. So it really can run the gambit on any day.
So with that said, because a lot of companies have a very singular, I should say, for lack of a better word, output, right? So either they're a service business or a product business. They either got technology or human capital. Either you got people on trucks or people in the office. And so there's very sort of on a relative basis, but what you're describing is you've got a range of potential outputs that have to be delivered for your quote unquote job or the company's mandates to be met, right? When I say company, I mean your company, the company that you work for and you're building. So how do you then, when you need to go build a team, and it's a 2-part question, you've obviously been in many situations where, as you said, you've adopted teams. And then, but you've also got to tweak them. Maybe people are in the right spots. Maybe they're not. Maybe they need coaching. Maybe they can't be coached. And then there are positions that didn't exist that you found that, are necessary. But ultimately, you're looking for a range of skills in the people. So how do you go about that? What do you use? Because for me, if I'm looking for a CFO, it's a lot clearer what I need to go find. Whereas if you're looking for a product service therapist, somebody who can, go all the way to the top and the bottom, like that's a very difficult thing to find. So how do you go about it?
It's not easy, but a lot of the times when I'm looking for good, as we call like a talent relations person to work, one is mature. Well, I'd say emotional intelligence is huge, and I think because I've had to develop and learn a lot about emotional intelligence myself, when I'm meeting people, like that is something that I don't necessarily ask the traditional questions of tell me, I can read your resume. I know what you've done, right? What I need to know is how do you navigate certain situations and what is your motivation? Because here, because of the nature of work that I do and the type of people that we're around, you can't want to be a superstar yourself because that's just not going to work for the job.
Yeah.
Like, no shade to those who that's the role that you want and that's your striving for life. But to really be a good talent relations person, I find those who are really good at the job aren't those that are trying to be in the forefront. So, because you really have to listen. You have to be a good listener. You have to pay attention to what's being asked. So if I'm asking someone a question, I want to know, do they hear what I'm saying? And then how well they respond to that so that I know they actually understand what I'm saying. I also look for, experience, like I said, is one thing, but also knowledge of understanding some aspect of the business is important because it's already hard work to teach emotional intelligence, which is, and then if I have to explain the industry at the same time, that's just, a lot. So some aspect of that, but then a lot of it is personality. Like, how well do we vibe? And and I've always done this. Like, I never hire anyone that's really like me. I tend to hire people who are not like me at all. I really like diverse perspectives and just personality, background, interest, because all of that factors into how we work with talent. Because I need different people so that way we can work with different people. Because if
Yeah.
everyone's like me, a problem, right? So yeah.
It's
So
funny.
that's where I start off.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I think if I was to synthesize for those who are not familiar with your industry, which, and look, having lived in LA for so many years, I'm still not familiar with the industry because it's such an enigma to me. But as you said, it's so multifaceted that it is hard to get your head around, and people spend their lifetime in that industry and still are learning, which I guess in some ways is exciting. In some ways it's sort of alarming, depending on which side of the coin you want to be at. But simplistically, you're in a service business, right? At the end of the day, you're providing a service. So those of listeners listening who are, come from the service background, they can relate to you in that respect, that ultimately your client is who you are trying to make successful, that you want their success, which I love, whether you're a landscaping company or a consulting firm, janitorial services company, or any company that is providing a service. Ultimately, you want to make sure your client's happy and successful. And in order to deliver that, you need to build a team. And then you need to make sure, as the manager of the team, that the team is happy and successful. So you keep your people happy, you keep your customer happy. I think everything else sort of falls in the right place. So that was more sort of a calibration, point rather than anything else for those who are not from within the industry. But going back to the points that you were making, which is, emotional intelligence being the top of your list. Do you think you can teach somebody emotional intelligence, or do you believe that emotional intelligence is intrinsic? It just needs to be uncovered, and you have to, peel the layers of the onion to be there. Does that make sense? Is that a teachable thing, you think?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I think it all depends on the person. Like, prime example, I've worked with people who are very ego driven, right? Like they cannot hear you. So then when it comes to working through that, it's so difficult for them to understand what's being asked is not like that complicated, but you're kind of making it complicated. But I think it's because they're coming from a place of ego. You have to remove yourself from the situation. And that's what we do. A lot of it is, yes, service, but we're also partners with a lot of these people. We're collaborators a lot of the time. And so you kind of have to take yourself out of the center, and you've got to put this other person there to then you can understand what their needs are. For example, I used to say this all the time. Like, I remember one time being called in on set because somebody was having a meltdown. Like, they were just having a bad day and no one could understand it. Like, the producers, you need to come on set. And I was like, oh, okay. Get to set, and they're just like, this town is like, they're freaking out about like their trailer, the AC, the this and that, da, da. So I, casually sit down, talk to, go in there, was like, what's happening? We're just talking. And then in that, find out like the problem wasn't that the trailer was too hot, the AC unit wasn't working. This person was having an issue, something completely unrelated, comes to set, they're like triggered. So the AC is what they're going to focus on, and then becomes a problem, and then everything else. But really what it comes down to is this person's like insecurities about not feeling like they're being heard on set. Yeah. They don't feel like they have a place, or like their voice isn't heard. So if you don't know that the problem really isn't the problem, there's always something else behind it, but you have to be patient enough to get there. Like, sometimes that's not always teachable. Like, you kind of have to know that. Other times I can explain that where I've explained it to folks, and I was like, they come to me like, oh my gosh, this person's, jumping off the wagon, they're freaking out. Oh my God, this and that. And then I'll say, okay, one, take a deep breath. Don't react. You need to stay calm. And then, okay, we're going to ask a couple of these questions. And I start asking questions. Okay, so what happened? When did this start? What triggered it? Did they say, oh, they said that? Oh, that's interesting. Ask them this, and so once I start to do this kind of like exercise with people that I work with, they've learned to adopt this kind of method of questioning to get to where they need to get to find out what the problems are, so then they really can be helpful. Yeah. So in some instances, yes, it is teachable. And then they start to pay attention and get into a place where they can do their jobs really well. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I won't ask who the talent was, so I won't go there.
I won't even say. I would never say.
I know you wouldn't, but maybe off camera. But I think the question, the thing that you point out on EQ is, I think there are two levels to EQ. That's what you're bringing up. There is the fundamental level to EQ where intrinsically you have that ability to pause, listen, think on your feet, but really truly empathize what's going on. You actually are in the moment trying to best understand the person. And it's almost short of being a qualified therapist, you're really there. And that allows the person who has this emotional intelligence to then help. All you're doing is help understand the problem before you can solve it, right? And really understand what the true problem is, not the problem being presented to you, right? Yes. 4 layers deeper, what might be happening, how much of it is circumstantial or background or, contextual, whatever it is, what that is. That's sort of, I call the deeper EQ, which you're touching on. And then there is the second level, which is more procedural EQ. And I think you're right that you can teach people the process of being empathetic or listen better or ask smart questions. But that's almost like the analytical side. And I think it's almost you're appealing to someone's intellectual side to say, hey, intellectually, you understand that these questions, how they would then extract certain answers. The challenge with that, obviously, is that if you haven't shared 2 extra questions, then unless they have the level 1 deep EQ, so on which they can build on, they will confine themselves with the list of questions you've given them, maybe add 1 or 2, but not really get to that deeper EQ. So I think correct me if I'm misstating it, I think there's a procedural part that you can coach and teach, which hopefully then triggers as it becomes a catalyst for that deep EQ that they can tap into. But then I've found that some people, even after sharing these procedural, soft questions, as some may call it, I think they're actually probably the more important questions to ask. they just don't get there, right? After a while, I'm like, I see them after many years still using the same question. I'm like, I think that question is irrelevant at this point. You may
Yeah.
have to go around.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that how you see it as well? That when you're coaching people and helping them navigate this rather high needed EQ world that you live in?
Yeah. Yes. It usually starts with a little shadowing, like I'll just lead, and I'll lead the conversation and they can hear me. And then I explain after, this is why I did that. Or if somebody was like, you realize the person was getting a little like intense. You see how I back, like I calm down, whatever. Like I even do listen to my voice. Like I never go above a certain thing. And then I, blah, blah, blah. I show them how like I will navigate situations. So that way you're never put in a uncomfortable situation that you can't get yourself out of.
Yeah.
But like I'll start small there and then I let people go. And then that's how I'm able to see where are they growing in this and can they do it? And usually I can tell after a while, like, okay, this person has it or they don't. And if you don't have it, it's just, this isn't a fit for you because you are going to struggle hard and so that's how, and then others exactly start to pick it up. And whereas then I'm no longer needed and they only come to me when it's really bad.
Yeah.
And then I walk them through that. Or it's like, I just have to jump in and, as we like to say, use my weight, right. To help move the situation forward. But you can tell when people are uncomfortable and they can never get comfortable. And that's when I know, like it starts to feel really hard for them. And the anxiety, you could see it on them, or like even the way that they communicate is hard. That's when I was just like, okay, this isn't your strong suit. And that's totally fine. And now let's figure out how to get you out of this and somewhere else that makes so much more sense for you.
How do you, I think going back to the thing you were saying was so it's good. I think this sort of goes to that first bucket of people that you've adopted, right? Like people that are on your team. But then obviously you've built teams. How do you find out, like what questions or process do you follow, questions you ask to determine if the candidate sitting in front of you has that EQ or has that potential EQ? How do you figure that out? Because a lot of people want that on their team. And I talk about this in the book as to what questions one could ask, but I'd love to hear your thoughts because it seems like in your world, it is such an important aspect of being successful.
Sometimes it's not always what I ask. It's more observations. So I will watch this individual like sit in front of me. And sometimes that's how I know. But the thing is, I've been in this space for so long that a lot of this is intuitive. And so I can feel it. I can see it. And I know that's like hard to articulate to people, but sometimes it really is, you just know.
Yeah.
Like prime example, I was interviewing for coordinators, right? We needed one desperately. And I got so many referrals and spoke to folks on the phone, had everybody come in. And I remember meeting bright, young, eager, this is, their second job probably in the industry, they've had one or two assistant roles and now they're ready for the next thing. And they, talent is a very coveted department because it is, the perception is like, it's shiny and glossy and it's fun and it's sexy. It's not glamorous at all. That's what I tell people. I was like, that's what it looks like on the outside because you just see us at everything and we're with the people, like we're with the celebs. But like realistically, it is not a glamorous job. It is very hard. It's super time consuming. There's a lot of details. But I have found that and I was talking to all these, like I said, young, eager folks. And I just, asked this, and I would ask the similar questions. Okay, why do you want to work here? Why talent? What do you watch? What kind of TV do you watch? What do you do in your, and I asked the broad questions. What do you do in your personal life? What's fun to you? What's this and that? And how do you handle a difficult situation? Tell me, I don't want to know how the success. I want to know what was hard and how did you navigate it? Yeah. That's what because we have more hard than we have positive. There's a lot of that. It's good, but like to get to the good, there's a lot of stress involved. And the one person that I remember, she was so calm and how I knew, she's just, I worked at Cannes in Paris And and right off the bat, I was like, oh, first of all, you had to do can. So I already know caliber of talent. And two, that is a very intense production because there's so much going on. And the way she spoke about it and how she talked about it, she was so even keeled. I was like, that is our person. Because this person is going to be able to handle no matter what is thrown at her, and she can remain calm despite the room being in an inferno and say, the exit is this way. This is where we need to go. Everybody follow me. And everybody like, got it. Okay, good. And that's how I could figure it out, where I've had some other folks and I was just like there, but just not ready for this kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
so,
interesting.
like,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, but like really ideally, like I think for me, if it had to come down to a question, the big one for me is, what was the hardest thing you had to do and how did you navigate it?
Yeah.
That is really, and that to me is like the big thing for what we do.
Yeah. It's really, I think some people listening may say the category of questions you're asking are behavioral questions, right? At the end of the day. But I think to the last question you just asked, it is a key one because, I often in my world, if you want to call it that, generally I go to a very personal place, not an uncomfortable personal place, but almost saying that on a personal level, what is it that you're most proud of? Or what is it that that was the biggest teaching experience of your life? And if the person wants to go into truly personal level, they'll go, and it's not a prompt, but it is truly respectful question, because if you're proud of something, then you really do want to talk about it. And I think a lot of people, especially self-reflective people, and that's another part of the EQ side that I find, that if you are self-reflective, often leads to a high EQ content. Doesn't guarantee it, but it does. And it has a high correlation. But in that question of what you are most proud of, it is a good positive question because people do like to talk about their achievements, and they should, they've earned it. But it doesn't have to be off resume or CV, right? It could be off the resume. And I think that's where, going back to your point about, I saw your resume, I got it, but let's talk about you now. I think that has led to a good revelation at times. It's amazing. Sometimes people are like, I'm not proud of anything. And then that's a whole different conversation at that point. That doesn't mean they don't have high EQ. It just means that you just need to do a little different angle of attack in terms of getting to know them. The flip side of what you're asking, the other side that you're asking about is like, what's been so hard? That still could be something they can be proud of. It could also be something where, asking about a point in time in life where there was the biggest teaching moment for them. I think the teaching moment, it comes across a lot more palatable than your biggest failure and our biggest embarrassment, because a teaching moment doesn't have to be a failure, right? A teaching moment, it can actually be success. And it doesn't have to be yours. It could be an observation of a family member or a friend. That could be your teaching moment. So for people who come and ask me as candidates saying, hey, how do I demonstrate my EQ? I often use that as a way of sort of coaching. And I'm going to say people, I'm talking about CEO candidates and CXO candidates. So these are not, spring chickens that are having this conversation with me. That said, I think going back to your point, EQ can be tested. It's just having EQ, you need EQ to test EQ also, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And for me too, I always like to know that, because the reality is we are going to mess up, right?
Yeah.
Things aren't going to go well.
Yeah.
I need to know that, one, you can admit that, hey, this was hard. This is what I learned, or I really struggled in this thing and I need help in XYZ, or I messed up and I don't know how to fix it, or I messed up. This is how I fixed it. And this is like because those things do happen. And I've always want to work with people that can say, yeah, my bad. Because I actually operate that way, because I was just like, it's not going to be perfect, especially in what we do, because we work with people. There's no real blueprint because we work with people.
Yep.
Every situation is different. Every human that we engage with is different, from the managers to the agents down to the talent themselves. So we're always in this, I forgot, like a friend of mine, I think a coworker, we became friends. She was watching me on set one day. And she said, I swear, if somebody didn't know what you did, someone could think that you might have multiple personalities because the way you engage with talent from one person to the next, your conversation with each person is very different. Even your approach to talking to these people is very different. But then I sit back and I know you, and then you just get back to self. I don't lose myself, but I also understand I can list from A to Z what's happening today to this one person, and they're like, got it, good, because that's how they need it. For this other one, I can only tell them, this is what we're doing right.
Yeah.
And then I have to go into like real personal talk and then say, okay, we're good. So remember, we're doing this thing again. Okay, cool. Got it. And I have to play that role. And then another person, it's very different. And so knowing that, like I said, things are not black and white with the talent relation world. It is anybody who works in this industry. We all have this respect for each other. We all understand the pains of the job because you are essential. Think about it just in your own family. Like you have siblings, just in your own household of what that dynamic is on a day to day. Remember growing up in your house and like having to share the TV with the sibling, who gets the remote tonight, who gets to pick what movie we're going to watch. This constant negotiation that you have to do as a kid, then to with your parents and the whole thing. Like that is the simplest way I'd say, but you are the one who's negotiating with all these people to get things done.
Yeah.
That's what we do. I'm very simplifying it because it's so much more layered than that, but like just to give you like a visual. So like on any given day, what I did yesterday is not going to apply to today.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also the attractive piece for somebody looking for variety, in their day to day, and somebody, it's a really good, I don't know if you've used any tools, but I've always been a big fan of tools such as MBTI or Predictive Index or Culture Index. These tools, they're very quick to do, but I have candidates do them because it gives me more data, more insights. And have you used certain things like that in your process in terms of finding talent at all?
Not in the initial part, but usually once I get them on, then I'm like, I like to have a better understanding of who I'm working with.
Yeah.
So then that helps me communicate with them.
Yeah.
And then they also have an understanding of how I like to work because I'm very like clear with everybody. I was like, this is my style. This is how I hate. I was like very easy-going. I'm very loose. I'm super transparent. I will always tell you what it is, how it's going. I'm very direct. I just say things as they are. I don't color my words. And some people have a hard time with that, which I always find fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, oh, wouldn't you want it just like this? But then some people I realize, like people who've worked with me, I realize, oh, you need me to say magenta. You need me to say, and it's going to be soft and fluffy. Yeah. So like I constantly am always having to adjust myself just for my team because I understand they themselves sometimes can't take the information that I'm also giving. So it's something that I work on all the time. But in terms of like tools, yes, like I'm always constantly reading. I'm always trying to figure out like, how can I be better? How can I do this better? This is interesting. Let me see if we can apply this to that. So if you ever have suggestions, I'm always down to, experiment. Let's try this. Let's play with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
What comes out of it. And like, how does this help our communication better? Because at the end of the day, communication is extremely important for like our line of work and what we do. The team's
happy to take that offline. Also, it's a lot of it's in that book as well. But the one thing that I would say though is that, sounds like you're very involved in the acquisition of talent for your team. You're involved as opposed to you haven't outsourced it to someone else in the company to do the pre-work and interviews. You really get into it yourself. And I think that is an amazing quality, but also often gets into scalability issues because you've got, like where do you spend more time? And so I think a lot of my coaching advice and practice and experience previously, which led to the coaching advice is how do I eliminate the wrong candidates earlier without wasting their time and my time? And it comes from a place of respect because I think you said something as you were describing the roles is that, you want that person to be successful in the role that you've got. And I think that is not just good for you and the company, but it's good for them because
Right.
you're doing the right thing. And when I was younger, I didn't quite understand why we would have amazing resumes that we would just not hire people. And then as I started to build a team myself and build, a bigger organization, it's right for everybody. And
Yeah.
so I think part of my tooling is to allow early detection and understanding with less onerous, toolkit. And then obviously as you go deeper, and then it's almost like you're spending more quality time with fewer people. So the richness of your interactions is a lot higher. So you actually have a higher ability to have a really good quality candidate. Because at the end of the day, you still only get hours. You don't get weeks or days unless it's an intern.
Yeah.
And they also get only a few hours with you. So it's well and good that, we can say, here is our way of working. They don't really have a glimpse to it other than trusting you. And so in that sort of small window, I felt like the quality of trust to be built with a handful of people is really important as much as you can. For them to really say, okay, Natasha's saying things and I can see her actually, even in our conversations, being that way, direct, transparent, honest, open, relaxed, intense, all of it. I can see all of these shades come through in that 2 hours I spent with her. But you can't spend 2 hours with 25 people. You can only spend a few hours. So it's sort of tailoring it so that you have more of an impact in that interview with select candidates. But one last question, actually 2 questions I want to ask. One is going back to that point around balancing your time, because, if you are building and you're so hands-on building team, how do you, because a lot of small, medium businesses and business owners, entrepreneurs, division leaders, executives who have got their teams, they've got a day job, they've got to go do that. But you've got to build these teams because that's how you scale and that's how you serve your clients and talent better in your case. How do you manage that? How do you manage building versus maintaining or growing?
Oh, it's simultaneous because in the perfect world, everybody would be where they need to be, right? Everybody would be on like a go, right? They're just, it's maintaining. But it's never that way. You usually have 1 or 2 people that I'm building have to help. And then others, it's the maintaining. But the maintaining, because they're maintaining, I also have to give them some attention so they don't feel neglected because the builders need more attention.
Yep.
So how I balance it, I think it's really on my scheduling, like I actually did this year where I literally dedicate 1 day to my, like, they can talk to me any other day. So 1 day is like our team building, like team meetings where we can really hash out things as a group. Everybody's talking. We can all have that camaraderie. And then I have 1 day where I have dedicated this entire day to one-on-one conversations. And this is the day I call Therapy Wednesdays because it keeps me in that mindset.
Therapy for who?
Sometimes it's both of us. But what it does, it keeps me in that mindset all day long where I am in a place of I'm here to help. I'm here to listen. I'm here to execute whatever's needed that they come to me with. I make myself present for them on that day. The other days is because that's where I do my day to day. That's where I'm in my meetings and that's where I'm in planning meetings and like strategy and this, that, other stuff. And then I have 1 day to myself, which is Fridays, where I don't schedule meetings. And it's the day that I actually get to read emails, answer things, catch up on all the stuff, organize my day job, and then also assess what's needed for the people, my team, for the week, month ahead. So that's kind of like how I balance it out. It's really by how I schedule my weeks and my days. And so I've really taken like ownership of my schedule and I keep it that way. And I've actually communicated that to everybody. It's like Wednesdays is off limits. That's literally therapy. I named it. I was like, that's therapy day. I'm in that mindset. I sit with the pen, I listen, I ask questions, and then they just are allowed to do the thing. And that's how I'm able to give the one-on-one to the maintainers where they feel heard and they're just like, I'm not as needy or whatever. And then the builders also have that opportunity where they really need to like unpack everything on a granular level.
Yep.
So
And is that
time throughout the rest of the week.
And does your team know that's Therapy Wednesday? Is that,
Yes,
does that
yes,
know?
yeah.
And have you always
Yes.
been, it was always done that across all the countries?
No,
That-
it wasn't, because what I found last year, I found that I was like a crazy person. I was all over the place because I would have these one-on-ones scheduled in between my day-to-day meetings, and I couldn't be fully present all the time because I was just like coming out of something, and then I would show up okay, and then I'd have to like take me like 10 minutes to get into that mode of where they need me, and by the time I needed to jump off because I have to go to something else, and I was just scattered all over the place.
Yeah.
And it felt exhausting to me every week at the end of the week. And so then when I realized, you know what? Let's rethink this,
Yeah.
and let's like readjust your days a little bit. And that has been very helpful. So that's how I stay balanced.
What happens if Wednesday 9 a.m. you get an inbound that you obviously weren't expecting, something's blown up, and then Therapy Wednesday, like is happening? Does that happen at all, or are you very disciplined? Nope, I'm not dealing with it until Thursday.
It has to be a really high value type of thing. It has not happened yet, but also with the flexibility that I understand, like it could happen, where it's just, hey guys, I'm going to have to push everybody's like meetings today. Something came up, but because I've committed to that day, and I've not had to cancel on anybody, whereas before I would have to move people around all the time.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is with this day, and even when other people try to schedule stuff, I'm really quick. Hey, any other day but Wednesday.
Yeah.
Any other, like anytime but Friday after this time. Like you can do Friday, but not past this time. And so people really respect that and they understand it. And for the urgent stuff, sure, like they'd understand it, but it won't even, I think they would be like, totally get it, got it, because I've been so consistent with this new schedule. Yeah.
And is that also the day when you interview for new candidates and new people to join the team, or is that a separate day that you do, or is that more sort of spread throughout the week?
I mean, that would, if I have to, I mean, luckily I haven't had to interview anybody new, but that is just, that would be later whenever, right? That would just have to be when it happens. And that's usually, but in terms of what I have currently, this has been
That's a great idea. I think a lot of people listening, a lot of small, medium business owners, that's, they sometimes allocate their weekend day for that. And I think that leads to really bad things, because then now you extended your work week and then you're exhausted and you can't really work with your team on a weekend because now you're expecting them to do it, or they would allocate the weekend for interviews. My advice in coaching is that structurally, procedurally put that in your week and not let it creep into the weekend. And I think having a dedicated day for your team and, is a great idea for a lot of people listening, especially, and you can also, if you've got a massive team, you can do it on a rotating basis too. So that, if you've got, some people say, I've got 250 people, I can't get to them. Absolutely. And so there are ways to do that, and you can identify, and maybe what it also does, it actually creates thoughts or an idea for the rest of your team to adopt. So you may have CXOs or other people reporting to you who are managing the 250, because 250 don't report into you. And so now you do it for them, they do it for their people. And so it creates a cascading effect that could then help other people as an idea to say, hey, can I work with this? Because obviously it seems to really help me. So thank you for sharing that one.
No.
Last question, 2 parts. As we wrap this up, what is the one thing that you say you recommend or you would do yourself all the time to those listening when it comes to talent acquisition or people development? And what's the one thing you tell people, please don't do that, to stay away from it? Or even if you're not comfortable being prescriptive, what's your practice of not doing, as you think about building teams in the future?
It's interesting, like you'd ask, like how I involved from like the early stage. I'm really into who are these people? Because I think essentially, I mean, it's always great. Like you have HR departments and the whole thing, but a lot of the times, you know what you need, you know what you want as a leader, you know what your team needs and that whole. So it's like trusting your gut to being able to assess things on the early side. I find very helpful. I really trust my instincts a lot. And that is, so when I see something and I'm just like, oh, this is interesting, or when I have an initial conversation, even if it's for 10, 15 minutes, I can assess, this is somebody I want to talk to a little bit longer. So I think I do is just, I'm in the process from the beginning. I think that's super important to finding good people, as opposed to just being handed, here are the top 5 people we think will work for you. And sometimes that's not always the case because you're relying on someone else to make some type of judgment call based off of what they think you need, but you know what those little pieces that are missing on your team and you know what's going to fit. I don't go against my instincts. So when I know I don't like someone, regardless of what everything else is saying, I trust that. Sometimes you have that shiny person, they have all the accolades, all the like bells and whistles, and you're just like, I can't put my finger on it, but I know that just this person just doesn't work. I trust that.
Yep.
Seen it where people like, oh, but they know this person and know this and that. And then especially like in entertainment, like there's a lot of nepotism, right? There's a lot of that. And you just know. And sometimes and then you're now in a situation where you've hired someone and within 3 weeks, you're like, should have gone with that other girl or should have gone with that other person,
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I definitely don't, I trust my gut.
That's really good. I think, look, I've always said that you need to have a process, especially as you scale businesses or teams. You need to rely on a process because it helps you, eliminate candidates that shouldn't be there and filter up those you do. But process is not a substitute to gut. Process is an addition to the gut. Because if you also just rely on gut, the question is that, how do you, you're always, in that conversational mode and there's no like substance behind it. And so I think there's a place for both of them. But I think what you're saying is really powerful, which is don't ignore your gut for those listening. Trust your gut, but have a process to get you there. And then, okay, what do I feel like? And then I love the do as well, which is as a leader or as a business owner or an operator, it's your thing. So you've got to be engaged and involved. Now, scale matters. So if you're a small team, then you can be, I think to your point, the earlier you are involved, the more you own the process yourself. And it could be, in your case, you own it and you can be directing it. But if you've got a bigger team, you can still lay out your aspirations and your vision of the role and the person that you're looking for. Clarity is key. I think the thing that you're getting at is clarity. You have clarity. I think a lot of people may not have the clarity you have, or may think you have a different thing in mind. And so therefore you bring that clarity to the process and by owning it. But if for those who can't have, they've got a big team and they're like, okay, someone's getting hired somewhere, in a bigger team, share the clarity, be clear and allow that to be.
Or even if you don't know, at least ask, what is it that you need? Ask those questions. I mean, and I get it. It all matters, and obviously the process, it's going to vary based on exactly like how many people you have on your team, what's your scope, yes, if you're a CEO and you have people at your company, there's no way you're going to those days of you doing that, you surpass that. So there's a different process for you. But I think, but it doesn't mean that when the CFO is hiring an EVP or hiring a GM, that still applies because this person is reporting directly to you. This is the person you're going to have to trust to make decisions on your behalf or be able to they're here to serve the company and help it get to that next level. So be engaged for what that's going to affect you.
Super powerful. Natasha, thank you for taking the time and sharing your thoughts and ideas. This was fun. I really appreciate it. We should do another one with all the other experiences that you've got and, but that's a separate conversation because I have a feeling.
Do you want to know how I left medical and what was that experience? Or how did you go from that to this and what was that during? Sure, we can always talk about
Well, also, I think one of the things that we didn't touch on that we won't go into this call, but is that, how is it that, what are things that you wish you had been told as you were working with the teams? Because you obviously had a lot of fun, not fun surprises along the way. And so in any case, it was fun today. I love the conversation. Thank you. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Thanks.
Cheers.
And there you have it, folks. Another episode of the People Quotient podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to give us a like and invite your friends and colleagues to join us in this community. Until next time, stay focused on your people. Signing off, Rohit Bassi.